ever considered the convoluted concept of original sin? How did this notion so firmly found in select Christian doctrines emerge, and how has it shifted over time? In the early stages, the term original sin was conspicuously absent from the teachings of the earliest Christians. Anwar Dawood, in his book For Every Question and Answer, highlights this on page 75. The term original sin is not found in the Bible, but has been arbitrarily adopted by some Christian factions. When we employ the term original sin, it breeds misunderstandings that warp biblical teachings. How can it be sane to assume that I inherit Adam's misstep? Adam alone should bear the weight of his deeds. As for the rest of us, we have inherited a blemished nature from Adam, not his sins, for which he alone is answerable. Nevertheless, the argument of original sin seems to strikingly disrupt the principles of individual responsibility, reason, and justice. Can it really be justifiable or rational to inherit the blunders of an ancestor and be held liable for deeds we did not enact? Such a bizarre concept could potentially destabilize the bedrock of individual responsibility and accountability for one's own actions and choices. Dr. Jujkabi Bubawi also scrutinizes this in his book, The Inheritance of Sin or the Dominion of Death, on page 20, where he lambasts the concept of original sin. The term original sin first emerged in the East. Bizarrely strange term original sin was unknown before Augustine, as it was only accepted at the end of the 4th century, popping up in Latin documents. This term carries a non-Christian implication, suggesting that humans are born in error, not death. This doctrine, which absurdly claims that human birth is inherently wrong, is tied to Manichaeism, which provoked the Church alongside the Gnostics. The Gnostics and Mani believed in a dichotomy, where humans and the universe are divided between a spiritual part created by a benevolent God and a material part created by a malevolent God. Asserting the inheritance of sin, as proposed by Mani and the Gnostics, renders the rejuvenation of humans and the universe impossible. It would necessitate the destruction of the evil creation, which embodies evil within itself and perpetuates it through procreation. Nevertheless, we are not born sinful because sin is a conscious and voluntary action, so it seems Christianity might need to reassess some of its doctrines. Prominently in the heart of the concept of original sin, we meet the controversial figure, Father Johannes Romanides, and his contentious work, Serious Sin. On 8, Romanides audaciously criticizes the pre-Augustinian perspective, stating, Augustine was the first to label the disobedience of Adam and Eve as original sin. This dramatic rebranding injected an exaggerated significance to sin. Nowadays, the term original sin pervades the English-speaking Western Christian world, a complete saturation which makes it virtually invincible to criticism in religious and theological circles. What the world generally accepts about original sin is directly due to Augustine's constructs and the dogmatic interpretations of theologians who blindly followed his lead. He further strikes, 2 centuries before Augustine, the earlier church tradition referenced the sin of our forefather Adam as the serious sin and not original sin, being literally called the forefather's sin in Greek, tonotopkos awaptnoua, which is incidentally the Greek title of this book. The word amartema points to a specific act, while the classical Greek term amartia, even in its plural form, denotes sin as a general ailment and weakness in body and soul, the fallen state of human existence, and the failure of humans to fulfill their purpose and destiny. These variations in the meaning of sin are usually ignored by commentators and translators of the Father's writings, leading to incorrect legal and moral judgments. Romanides emphatically disapproves of the concept of original sin as the inherited universal guilt due to Adam's transgression. He underlines, the fathers did not Adam's disobedience to original sin or general sin, but the notion of a God saddling personal guilt due to Adam's sin on all of humanity from the moment of their formation was far beyond the understanding of the fathers of the Church, or even in their wildest imaginations. They placed personal liability solely on Adam and Eve, the wrongdoers. Original sin casts a damning shadow over the Augustinian model, and the theologians after Augustine. This scene sets the tone for the theological shift that occurred with Augustine's interpretation in the subsequent scene, causing further disarray in Christian theology. Augustine of Hippo arrived on the scene in the 4th century, taking it upon himself to popularize the controversial concept of original sin within Christian theology. He interpreted the actions of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden as a catastrophic fall from grace, a sin he claimed was inherited by all their descendants, a contentious notion that raises important questions about the fairness of Christian doctrine. Yet it wasn't until the Second Council of Orange in the 6th century that the dubious concept of original sin truly began to take form. It was in this controversial assembly of church leaders that the term was conveniently used to describe the supposed state of sin all humans are presumed to bear from birth. From this questionable moment, the idea proliferated throughout the Christian world, eventually solidifying its position as a divisive cornerstone of Western Christian dogma. Fast forward to the 16th century at the height of the Protestant Reformation. Figures such as Martin Luther and John Calvin dared to tinker with Augustine's concepts, showing a propensity for the modification and manipulation of religious beliefs to suit their own interpretations. In this modern era, the perception of original sin continues to conveniently morph. A multitude of theologians are quick to emphasize the societal dimensions of sin, opting to view original sin not as ancestral guilt, but rather as an endemic problem deeply entrenched in human society. This shifting narrative tends to deflect responsibility and critically calls into question the very foundations of Christianity. In conclusion, the concept of original sin has evolved from its primitive non-recognition in early Christian beliefs, to its imposition by Augustine, forced acceptance at the Second Council of Orange, exaggeration during the Protestant Reformation, and ultimately to its convoluted interpretation in modern times. This principle, underpinning an array of Christian doctrines, exposes the mercurial and questionable nature of theological speculation. Remember, the next time you stumble upon the term sin, it's not just a mere idiom, but a manipulative construct of the Christian doctrine.